Alrighty, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, students. This is going to be your Unit 6 revision. We're going to revise this. You could watch this video multiple times before your exam on Monday. We'll have a 10-15 minute Q&A session review on Monday before the exam. The first section here is Nubuwwah. This is what we talked about. All before this was Ilahiyat, matters related to the divine and his attributes. And of course, we still will mention matters related to divine and his attributes as well. All right, covering Nubuwwah here is the first section. And you have to know the difference between a Nabi and a Rasul. Both of them share in receiving revelation, but a prophet is not bound to face the enemy of his time and spread it. A Rasul is. He's obligated to face the enemy of his time and to spread this message. The Anbiya al-Rusul, the Nabis, number of Anbiya, prophets, about 124,000. You have to remember, you have to say about. Rasul, about 315. And again, you have to say about. By definition, clearly every Rasul is Nabi, because a Rasul is more specific than Nabi. So it's like a rectangle and a square. Both have four sides, but the square is more specific in its requirement than a rectangle. Now on the Salah and Salam. As-Salah is the descent and the blessing of all good things to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Salam is all protections for that Prophet. That's the meaning of Salah and Salam when it comes from Allah to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When it comes from us to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we are bestowing Salah and Salam upon him. It is us taking from that blessing and that protection, and that's the meaning of the Prophet saying, Allah gives and I distribute. All right, some descriptions of the Prophet in line 32. وَإِنَّ مُحَمَّدًا صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ عَبْدُهُ الْمُصْطَفَى وَنَبِيُّهُ الْمُجْتَبَى وَرَسُولُهُ الْمُرْتَضَى. So you have to know the meaning. Mustafa, chosen for purity. Mujtaba, chosen to be drawn near. Mukhtar, chosen for his good qualities. Murtada, chosen for being pleasing and loved. And then the greatest of all names, attributes, and descriptions of the Prophet is the word abd, because the slave implies that all of his behavior, all of what this person does represents the master. He's a pure, perfect representation of the will of the master. What all prophets must have: sidq, amana, fatana, tabligh. Sidq, truthfulness in speech. Amana, trustworthiness in action. Fatana is the highest level of intelligence. And tabligh, that he accurately transmitted the full message. Of course, you know the five ulul azm: Nuh, Ibrahim, Musa, Isa, and Muhammad. These prophets had the greatest missions, and they were all messengers, of course. Now keep in mind, that's amazing that these are only about 315, and these are the five ulul azm. So there are so many other messengers besides them, but these are the five greatest ones. And most prophets come from the poorest family of the most elite tribe, and this allows them to relate to the poor and to be accepted by the rich. The most important three doctrines relating to prophets, or to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is number one, isma, sinlessness. Number two, khatm, an-nubuwwah, the finality of prophethood. Number three, al-bi'tha lil-alamin, that he's sent to all people and times. As for the proof of isma, is that Allah commands us to follow the Prophet, and he would not command us to follow a sinner. And the verse for that, قُلْ أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ, obey Allah and obey his messenger. And another proof of that, وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَى, he does not speak from his whims. If he does not speak from his whims, then everything he says is for us to follow. And because has amana, he follows and he acts upon what Allah commands him to. As for Khatmun Nubuwwah, line 33 of the Tahawiyah says, وَإِنَّهُ خَاتَمُ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ وَإِمَامُ الْأَتْقِيَاءِ. He is the seal of prophets and the leader of the righteous. And the ayah for that is مَا كَانَ مُحَمَّدٌ أَبَا أَحَدٍ مِّن رِجَالِكُمْ وَلَكِنْ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ وَخَاتَمَ النَّبِيِّينَ كَانَ اللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا. Surah Al-Ahzab. And سيكون في أمتي حديث بخاري 30 كذابة كلهم يزعم أنه نبي وأنا خاتم النبيين لا نبي بعدي. I am the seal of all prophets. There is no prophet after me. وكل دعوة نبوة بعد نبوته فغي وهوى. Every claim to prophecy after him is false and is deceit. So da'wah here is a claim or invitation. And ghay, misguidance. Hawa, whims with no basis or proof. So the false prophets in Islamic history, Musaylim al-Kadhab, Sajah, Tulayha, al-Aswad al-Ansi. Right, and there you have there's the stories about them. Then there you have those four came in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Then you have Baha'u'llah. He's the founder of the Baha'i movement. It's a Shi'i sect. So it's already innovators. And upon that, he claimed prophecy. And then you have Mirza Ghulam al-Qadiani, the drug addict from Lahore, 1908. And he's the founder of the Qadiani sect. The man was a drug addict. And the British are the one who put it in his mind, claimed prophethood. They probably supplied him with the drugs too. He was a drug addict because he was sick. He started taking medicines to ease the pain, and then he became addicted to these things. And that's eventually he went cuckoo, and he claimed, not only did he claim that he was a prophet, he claimed that he's the reincarnation of Isa. Shajib. Then you have the Elijah Muhammad. It's crazy, right? From Detroit, was a disciple of a Qadiani. So the Qadianis did a lot of da'wah in America, and their books are still out there. Barnes & Noble used to have their books. You go to the Islam section, it's Qadiani books. Now, one of their guys, his name was, what was his name? I can't remember his name. But he was the teacher of Elijah Muhammad. He was Elijah Muhammad's teacher. So Elijah Muhammad his name was Elijah Poole. Elijah Poole got this idea of becoming a prophet, calling himself a prophet. He got that idea from, there he is. His name is Fard Muhammad. All right, Fard Muhammad. This guy was a Qadiani Pakistani Qadiani. And he was Elijah Poole's teacher, and he's the one who convinced him to become a prophet. There's a lot of other false prophets, and it's important to know that Khatm al-Nubuwwah is not up for discussion. The next doctrine that's so important is that the prophet was sent to all people of all times and all places. Unlike every other prophet and messenger, they were just sent to a specific group of people. But Muhammad Sayyid al-Kawnayn, like Prophet Nuh before him, Prophet Nuh was sent to all people, but not all times. Prophet Muhammad is sent to all people and all times, up until the end of time. Line 35 of the Tahawiyah says, وَهُوَ الْمَبْعُوثُ إِلَى عَامَّةِ الْجِنِّ وَكَافَّةِ الْوَرَى. Sent to all the jinn and humans, بِالْحَقِّ وَالْهُدَى. And Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً إِلَّا كَافَةً لِلنَّاسِ بَشِيرًا وَنَذِيرًا. We have not sent you except to all people. Sent to all people. All right, next one. Now we move into the second subsection in this unit, which is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِنَّ الْقُرْآنَ كَلَامُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى مِنْهُ بَدَى بِلَا كَيْفِيَّةٍ قَوْلًا. Okay. The Quran is the speech of Allah. It is the uncreated word of Allah that is established within His essence. مِنْهُ بَدَى. It came from Him. بِلَا كَيْفِيَّةٍ قَوْلًا. Which means you cannot attribute the words of the Quran to the Prophet ﷺ or to Jibreel alayhi. You cannot say the meaning is from Allah, but the words from Muhammad. You cannot say this. لَيْسَ لِأَحَدٍ فِي أَصْلِ تَرْكِيبِهِ كَسْبٍ. There is no human being has a role in deciding what the words of the Quran were or are. Okay. Now the word Quran applies to four different things. The uncreated word of Allah before the creation of languages or anything else. The written word of the Quran in the Arabic language. The memorized Quran in our hearts that has no form. You say, the Quran is in his heart. Yes, you can say that. It's not symbolic. But where is it? I open his heart, I don't see Quran. Obviously, you're not going to see ink and writing. Number 4, the recited word with the human voice. The fitna of the creation of the Quran led to a lot of theological discussion, which we're going to just talk about here for a second. And remember, we said that theology is transmitted and dialectical. Transmitted theology is simply what we're told from the Quran and the Hadith. Dialectical theology is when a group says something wrong and the scholars need to correct it. Okay, such as, to give an example, there is no verse in Hadith that says you must believe that the greatest Sahaba is Abu Bakr and Umar, Uthman, Ali. So the Sunni scholars, they never taught that in the beginning. But then the Shia came and said, no, the greatest Sahabi is Ali. So now the Sunni scholars had to discuss and ask, who can we say is the greatest? So they came to the conclusion that the only people who can judge amongst the Sahaba are the Sahaba themselves, or the Prophet. So if the Prophet ﷺ did not say who is the greatest amongst the companions, he never said that. But the companions themselves did choose an imam. And back in that time, your imam was the most virtuous amongst you. So the companions had consensus that Abu Bakr should be their imam first, then Umar, then Uthman, then Ali. So that's an example of dialectical theology in which there's no verse about it, but some other people come and they say something wrong. Now we have to answer them. We have to research. So what is the methodology? The methodology is we can't judge the Sahaba. They can judge themselves, or the Prophet can judge them and the Quran can judge them. And where the Prophet and the Quran are silent on who is the best of them, the Sahaba spoke. They spoke by selecting Abu Bakr as their Khalifa, and they all agreed upon that. And that is consensus of the companions, and that's how we can say that the greatest of companions is Abu Bakr, because that's what the Sahaba said by their action of selecting him as their leader. And at that time, there was no separation between virtue and leadership. The Imam was the most virtuous. The Khalifa at that time was the most virtuous. Later on, it split. So here the question is, if the Quran is the uncreated word of Allah, how is it in a created language? This question was brought forth by the Mu'tazila. The first two groups to address this, they made the same mistake, which is they accepted the same premise that the only definition of the Quran, meaning of Quran, is the written and spoken word. So the Mu'tazila said, therefore, if we clearly see Arabic is a created language, the Quran is created. This is a mistake. The Hashawiyya said, the Quran is uncreated. So they're correct about that. But they also said something that we know not to be true, which is a lesser error. They said, your recitation of the Quran is uncreated. The first error, the Mu'tazila's error, puts you outside of Ahl Sunnah. You can't say this. Quran is created. You're denying Allah's speech. Yes, you're saying that He created it, but you're denying that it is the uncreated, pre-eternal word of Allah. So that's an innovation. But the Hashawiyya simply made a mistake, and they said something no rational, intelligent person can accept, which is that your recitation of the Quran is also uncreated. So Ahl Sunnah came and they separated between two things. As we said, look at this previous slide here. We said that the Quran is both the uncreated word of Allah and it's the written word of Allah. So it has two different definitions here. So we have to separate between these two things. Yeah. And so the Quran is the uncreated word of Allah. The recitation and the writing is created. Okay. The recitation and the writing is different element than the uncreated word. It's a different thing completely. And here we have the philosophy of languages, as we've covered this. Ad-dalu wal-madlul. The indicator and the reality. Okay. The word apple and an actual apple. They're two different things. But you could say both of them are apple, right? The word apple applies to both of them. Written on a card or an actual apple. So ad-dal wal-madlul. So the recited word of Quran is ad-dal. And the uncreated speech of Allah is the madlul. And that's how the Ahl Sunnah brought both of these things together. Okay? So again, you have the word indicator, ad-dal. That's the expression that indicates a reality. And the madlul is the reality. Regarding the Quran, the written and recited words, which we cannot deny. No human being on the earth can deny that these are created. pixels on a screen, ink on a paper, noise from a mouth. It's creation. And we can call that Quran, because that's dal. That is the dal. Right? And we call that al-kalamul lafdi. But what is that dal indicating? It's indicating the pre-eternal, uncreated word of Allah that existed before languages, before anything, concept of beginnings and end and created things. And we call that as al-kalam al-nafsi. We term that kalam al-nafsi. Both are referred to as the Quran. Why? Because the Quran itself refers to the Quran as the uncreated word of Allah, the written word, the memorized Quran in your hearts, and the recitation with your voice. Okay, so that is ad-dalu wal-madlul. And this is a paragraph you can go through to make sure that you understood the concept of ad-dal wal-madlul and the difference between the writing / recitation and the pre-eternal uncreated word. And we separate those two by calling one category al-kalamul lafdi, which is ad-dal, the indicator, and the other category al-kalamul nafsi, which is the madlul, or the indicated reality. Okay. We now look at wahy. Imam al-Tahawi says, وَأَنزَلَهُ عَلَى نَبِيهِ وَحْيًا وَصَدَّقَهُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ عَلَى ذَلِكَ حَقًّا. Linguistic meaning, any communication that cannot be seen or heard in Sharia. It refers to the revelation of the Quran to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so in linguistic meaning, any communication you can't see or hear. In Sharia, it's the revelation. Wahi comes to prophets through the holy books. Wahi comes to non-prophets through ilham, inspiration to do something. And wahi comes to animals through the instinct with which they were created. Okay. وَمَا كَانَ لِبَشَرٍ أَن يُكَلِّمَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَّا وَحْيًا أو من وراء حجاب أو يرسل رسولا فيوحي بإذنه ما يشاء إنه على كل شيء إنه علي حكيم. So here we have Allah's speech to humans only occurs in three ways. Through wahi. What is wahi? It was a heat and weight that came down on the Prophet ﷺ with the sound of a ringing of a bell. That's wahi. Behind a veil, it is the thrusting of a meaning into your heart or off your tongue from which you have no knowledge regarding its whereabouts. You don't know where this came from. Just came into your heart. This is what we call min wara'i hijab. We also call this ilham, or inspiration. And three, through a messenger. Angel Jibreel comes, tells the Prophet ﷺ. Quran was revealed by methods 1 and 3. Or we can even perceive anyone giving us good advice, right, telling us something absolutely true. We can say that's Allah telling me that through a messenger, through a person. It's not going to be religion, revelation. It's just going to be something from the religion. All right. So the Quran, though, was revealed only through methods 1 and 3. That's it. Method 1 and method 3. How is the Quran revealed and compiled? Quran is Allah's word established within His essence from pre-eternity. We call that al-kalam al-nafsi. It was then written in word form, kalam lafdi, in al-lawh al-mahfuz. Then it was brought down to Bayt al-Izzah in the lowest heavens on Laylat al-Qadr. Okay, and that is when the day the Prophet received the first revelation. How did he receive that? أو يرسل رسولا, through Jibreel as a human, form of a human. He comes in the form of a human. Of course, he doesn't become a human. He comes in the form of a human. Then it was revealed munajjama. What does munajjaman mean? In parts, over 23 years. Then various scrolls were gathered in the time of Abu Bakr. It was written in book form in the time of Uthman, and the current dots and short vowels were invented by Khalil ibn Ahmad. And number 8, which is not written here, the font of Naskh was invented by Ibn Muqla. Take a look at Arabic before dots and short vowels. Letter of the Prophet to the Persians. Okay, look at how simple the writing is. All right, now we go to وَأَيْقَنُوا أَنَّهُ كَلَامُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى بِالْحَقِيقَةِ. What does it mean that it's Allah's word in reality? Meaning, it is not the meaning from Allah and the words from Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now, you have to memorize this little table here. When the meaning and the words are from Allah, that's the Quran. When the meaning is from Allah and the words from the Prophet, it's hadith Qudsi. They usually begin with, "O my slaves." When the meaning is from the Prophet and the words from the Prophet, that's hadith Nabawi, with a B for Nabi, Nabawi. Has nothing to do with Nawawi. Many people confuse the two. Nawawi, the 40 Nawawi hadith, is just a compilation of hadith that Imam an-Nawawi gathered. And Nawawi is from a city called Nawa. It refers to a city called Nawa. وَلَيْسَ بِمَخْلُوقٍ كَكَلَامِ الْبَرِيَّةِ cannot say that the Quran is created. Right? Cannot say that it is. Why? Because part of the word Quran refers also to his uncreated speech. The word Quran refers to both the uncreated word of Allah that is pre-eternal and the recitation and writing which are created. Kalam nafsi and kalam lafdi. Both of them refer to the word Quran, therefore you cannot say the Quran is makhluk. فَمَنْ سَمِعَهُ وَزَعَمَ أَنَّهُ كَلَامُ الْبَشَرِ فَقَدْ كَفَرَ. Anyone who says the meaning is from Allah, but it's Muhammad who authored the words, or Jibreel who authored the words, or anybody who says that even the meaning is from Muhammad, he's just a book he wrote. Astaghfirullah. He's a kafir. Even one letter. Kunu kafira. Remember what we do with the Zindiq. A Zindiq can't enter Mecca, Medina. All relations cut. His marriage is nullified on the spot. He's not buried in the Muslim graveyard. Everything about him is invalidated. His salah behind him is, to pray behind him is sinful and invalid. It's the worst type of crime a person can commit. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by punishment for the one who says the Quran is the created, meaning that it's not the word of Allah, it's the word of Muhammad, or he wrote it, or he thought of it. It's the speech of a human, right? Anyone who says those types of things, out of Islam. وَمَنْ وَصَفَ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى بِمَعْنَى مِنْ مَعَانِيَ الْبَشَرِ فَقَدْ كَفَرَ. He means here that whoever says Allah speaks like humans, using air, making sounds, and relying on created languages, he's committed kufr. Because you're rendering something that is qadim to be hadith. Qadim, remember, is infinite, no beginning. Right? Transcendent beyond time. Hadith, something of the world. All right, next one here. Yalla. All right. فمن أبصر هذا اعتبر عن مثل قول الكفار انزجر وعلم أن الله تعالى بصفاته ليس كالبشر. The commentary here, he emphasizes the tanzih of Allah in his that, sifat, and af'al. Remember, when you think of the Creator, when you think of Allah, when you think of theology, you have three qualities, or three elements. The essence of Allah, the attributes of Allah, and the actions of Allah. The attributes are the description of the essence. They are not separate from the essence, and they are not the essence of themselves itself. It's a description. And the af'al are the actions that he takes. Nothing hadith with a beginning, nor with a body. Jism, this should be a J here. Jism can ever be attributed to any of these three things. Essence, attributes, actions. We move now to the next subcategory or subsection of our aqidah called ar-ru'ya, the divine vision. For the divine vision, it is true. We must believe that it is true. Now keep in mind, what we don't know is how we will see Allah Ta'ala. What we do know, that we do know that Allah is not a body. Therefore, he will not be seen. We can say how it will not occur. It will not occur the way we see things here. He's at a distance. We see his front. We don't see his back. He's a body. We know that stuff is all incorrect. We don't know how we will see him. We do affirm that there will be a vision. So that's how we handle all such questions. We negate what we know is not true. We affirm what we know is true. And then we leave what we don't know blank. We just say it will be, we'll discover that on Yawm al-Qiyamah. We don't know. It's like saying, Person's taking a trip, let's say, to Rome. Take a trip to Rome. We're on the way to Rome. We're going to land in Rome. That we don't know what Rome looks like. Nobody can make stuff up, right, to fill in the blanks. So you leave it blank. That's why he says here, وَتَفْسِيرُهُ عَلَى مَا أَرَادَ. The manner in which this vision will happen is with Allah. We just know certain things. We know that it will happen. We know that Allah is not a body to be seen from a distance and having a boundary and is made up of matter. But we don't know how this vision will occur. Leave it as a mystery. So we do three things here. We affirm, that's ithbat. We affirm that it will happen. We negate, tanzih. We negate what is inconceivable for Allah, which is a body, a location, a distance between us and Him, a front and a back. That's tanzih. And tafweed. We leave it blank. We don't know how it will happen. And some things you can make ta'wil. That's 3B here. We can give it a meaning. As example, Malik, when he says Allah descends down to the lowest heavens, he gave it ta'wil, which means His command. Others said an angel comes taking the prayers and rendering them as accepted with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, taking them up so they become accepted. Okay. Not that the angel accepts it or rejects it, but the angel takes it, reflecting that it has been accepted. Okay. Again, you just have to remember it easy. We negate what we know is not true about Allah. We affirm that the vision will happen, and we don't know how it will happen. That's it. All right, last section is submission and the question of good and evil. All right, once a person has trusted a source, then they must accept whatever comes from that source. Imam al-Tahawi says, ما يسلم في دين الله في دينه إلا من سلم لله ولرسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم ورد علم ما اشتبه عليه إلى عالمه. Submission, just like in the vision, the ru'ya. We know that to negate that God is a body, going to float or hover in the sky, and we're going to look at Him as a piece of matter like the moon or a sun or a star. Okay? And let's go back here. The hadith of the moon means that we will not jostle to experience the vision. But it does not mean that Allah is a body like the moon. Okay? So we would negate what we know is not true. We affirm what we know is true, and we leave blank what we simply don't know. And that's the meaning of يَسْلَمُ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ وَرَدَّ عِلْمَ مَا اشْتَبَهَ عَلَيْهِ. So you don't know something, just say we don't know. It's impossible for us to know until we experience it. All right, and we go back to this one here. These are the three steps that we take. Ithbat, we affirm that this verse came from Allah and we believe it. Tanzih, we negate what is inconceivable, what Allah told us is impossible. Allah told us this will not happen. Allah told us that He is transcendent, beyond bodiliness and world and created things. And tafweed, how does the vision happen? We don't know. We leave it to Allah Ta'ala. And we'll see it on Yawm al-Qiyamah. What's the rush? Every believer will see it and let yourself be surprised. Maybe Allah wants to give you a surprise. Not everything we're going to have to know in this life. Okay, so when we talk about submission, we now bring this to moral matters too. Why is this halal? Why is this haram? Why is dhuhr 4 rak'ahs, etc.? So investigation is directed to the source. And where is our picture here? The trunk of the tree, for example. We gave the picture of, it's not loading right now, but the trunk of the tree, that's the source. The branches are the testimony of that source. So once we accept the source, we accept Allah, what He brings us. Accept Allah and His Messenger. We only ask two things after that. Did Allah actually say it, and what did He mean by it? All right, so rulings are either ta'abbudi or mu'allal. Ta'abbudi, He has not told us the reason at all. We have to accept it as is. Dhuhr is 4 rak'ahs, so you have to accept it. There's no reason why it's 4 rak'ahs. Allah told us. He didn't tell us a reason. Of course, Allah doesn't act without a reason. There is a reason, but we haven't been told. Mu'allal. He tells us the reason. Why not to take drugs or alcohol or whatever? We know the reason for that, which is it's going to disallow you from thinking. So when Allah tells you the reason, then if that reason is gone, then the prohibition is gone. Yeah. Next, you have to understand the source of good and bad. Does God command what is good? Or does something become good just because God commanded it? We said both of these perspectives, they separate between God and goodness. Okay? And the answer is that everything he commands becomes good because of its association with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And you have to memorize this. This you have to know. Al-husnu ma hassanahu ash-shar'u wal-qubhu ma qabbahahu ash-shar'u. Anything that Allah commands, then we deem it in our ethics to be good. Okay? Anything that is bad, the Sharia forbids, then we deem it as bad. And anything that's halal, it's up to your opinion and your society, and they could decide what's good or bad if something is merely halal. But you have to memorize this right here. Whoever wishes to know what is forbidden and is not satisfied with surrender, this person, فَيَتَذَبْذَبُ بَيْنَ الْكُفْرِ وَالْإِيمَانِ. If you try to pierce with your mind what is not knowable through the mind, it's only knowable by transmission, like the vision. How will we see Allah Yawm al-Qiyamah when he is not a body floating in the sky? We're going to find out at that time. There's no other way to find out. You cannot know by thinking about it. So he's saying here that if you refuse to accept this and you insist on thinking about it and making stuff up with your mind, you will end up يَتَذَبْذَبْ, going back and forth from belief to kufr. And you'll become one of these crazy types who make stuff up in their religion and are rejected. Okay. All right, about the divine vision again. To say it's an illusion and an imagination, line 50, is wrong. To say that it exists as with God as a physical body, wrong. To say that it is a true vision without distance or body, correct. To say that we don't know how we will experience this, correct. That's it. ولا يصح الإيمان بالرؤية لأهل دار السلام لمن اعتبرها منهم بوهم. You can't say it's an illusion. أو تأولها بفهم. Or you can't say it's like the visions of this world. And these two lines are self-explanatory. They're talking about the same things we've just been reviewing and talking about. All right, that is your review session. سبحانك الله وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.